Hey YouTube, I hope you're on fire. Today we're going to continue with the post-production part of the CrossFit short movie we made in the last creative vlog. And this time we're going to tackle the part that is often the most neglected and that many consider the least important when it's just the opposite. Believe me when I tell you that sound is 80% of the immersion you can feel when you watch a video. Today we're gonna talk about how I find my music, the voiceovers, sound design, and how we mix everything together in the best way to drag the viewer into the film. Come on, if you're ready, we're not wasting time, let's go. The first thing you need to ask yourself is whether or not there is a voiceover. The voice allows you to support the narration and to bring elements of understanding that would have been very complex to illustrate in images. It is therefore a good thing, but in return you must understand the complexity of having a good voiceover. And I'm not necessarily talking about tonality, but above all about the ability to convey emotions in the voice. The people who do voiceovers are actors. It's a particular profession. It's very difficult to have a good voiceover. Here, of course, it's JP, the coach who's highlighted in the video, who had to do it. And I can tell you that there were quite a number of takes before we could get a correct result. In terms of direction, it will be quite complex to explain this to you. So I'm going to focus instead on giving you a couple of tips on how to improve the tone of a voice. The goal is not to get into a complex sound effects tutorial. I'm just going to show you one or two effects that possess a few presets that can save you in most cases. First of all, depending on the quality of the recording, I advise you to apply a little denoiser, just in case there is a slightly unpleasant room noise, depending on the quality of the microphones and the recording environment at your disposal. You can use a multi-band compressor effect, where you will find a lot of presets that improve the sound and the depth of a voice. But personally, I use the dynamic processing effect instead. I start from presets specific to the voice, but above all, it's an effect that I find easier to customize to get what I want. To finish, I use an amplify effect, either to raise or lower the volume,
s'entraîner,
so that the voice always stays around -6 dB and there is not too much peak.
pratiquer pour la recherche constante d'amélioration.
A funny little trick if you want to give a trailer effect to your voiceover, well, try to take your voice as low as possible and then you can have fun with the pitch to try to create your own movie trailer.
Pratiquer pour la recherche constante d'amélioration.
In a world of photographer. It can give warmth and a deep tone to a voice, but don't mess around too much with it anyway. Take it easy. Some time ago, I had an idea to make a video that would have compared all the online music services and explain why I choose the one I choose. If you've seen the previous video on the editing and transitions part of the movie, you know that when I started YouTube a year ago, I took a subscription on Artlist for everything music. The thing is that this summer, they contacted me to give me the opportunity to create affiliate links. If you use the links that are in the description of this video to subscribe to their service, you get 2 months for free, and they give me a small commission. They also offer me a 1-year subscription to Artgrid, their stock footage service, and since I was already paying a subscription fee for the music on Artlist, they extended my account so that I could also enjoy their sound design offer. Except for these two advantages, I'm not sponsored by them, they don't pay me to say anything, so I'm free to give my opinion on their service. But still, no, I don't feel too legitimate to make a comparison with all the other services. So I'm going to let you do your own research to find the best website for you, but here are a few tips to try to find it. I had classified the different platforms according to 4 criteria. First, of course, the quality of the music, then the price, the services offered for this price, and finally the license, the possible use you can make of the music. To summarize the result I arrived at, and you're free to do whatever you want with my opinion, for me the best ones were, and especially in terms of music quality, MusicBed, Epidemic Sound, and Artlist. Epidemic Sound is the one that is really used a lot by YouTubers. You also have a library of sound design, and it often allows you to download music on different tracks, with the voice on one track, the bass, for example, on another. On Artlist, you often have an instrumental version, another one with vocals, but not always. MusicBed is quite special since they license artists who don't create specifically just for the platform. But where it has been a no-brainer for me is precisely about the license. When you take a subscription to Artlist, your license covers everything, which is not the case with the others. It covers the video you're going to put on YouTube, yes, but also the commercial projects you can do, and believe me, this is where the price of licenses can really get crazy. I make YouTube videos, yes, but being able to use the music for my commercial projects in motion design or filmmaking without paying extra fees, ooh, bueno. For me it was the obvious choice, especially since I fell in love with some of the music on Artlist. I think you have more variety in music genres than on some other platforms, where I feel you always have the same electro-pop, hip-hop that you find everywhere. But here we're starting to talk about personal taste, so So it's Artgrid that we are going to use for all the audio components, and I will show you how I do to find the proper sounds.
My first idea was to go with the kind of music I like, which is very cinematographic, classical with an epic side, you know, like film score.
But choosing accordingly to personal taste goes against the right way to tell a story. Music must be in line with the message you want to convey. What is its role? What emotions it should convey? For that, we're going to define the mood and the kind of music in adequacy with our brief, which we had done in pre-production.
So I look at the type of sound you find when doing CrossFit, and it's rarely classical. Now we're talking about the big, loud hip-hop that breaks your ears. There has to be a huge boom-boom vibe in it. I don't know if you can search on Artlist just by telling it that you want some boom-boom, but that's okay. You can browse the website according to the genre and the mood. You can also refine my tempo and duration. Remember the last time we talked about the editing? We cut our video into 3 parts. The exposure part has a very different atmosphere from the next one, where we really have this explosion, this strong rhythm in the edit. With a bit of luck or more research, we could have found a single music that combines the two, but in the end I found 2 musics that suited me well. Let's go back into the software where we'll start working with all this. As we saw in the previous video, I work a lot with the principle of pre-composition, where in Premiere we talk about nested sequences. You put a part of your editing into one sequence, which you're going to put into another sequence, and so on. Here, for example, it allows me to have a dedicated sequence for sound work. I also created a proxy, that is to say that I made a first rendering of my final cut just for ease of playing in the timeline. There are a lot of effects, color correction. I don't want to waste time with lags. Here I can read all my editing in one go and be able to adjust the sound without slowing down. I'll use back the editing sequence when I will launch my final rendering. I also organize my tracks, something I didn't mention last time. Here I have 1 track for the voiceover, 2 for the music, because we're going to have to mix different parts of the song. And then I have at least 6 or 7 tracks dedicated to sound design, because we're going to have to mix a lot of things together. Again, I use color codes. I really need visual cues. I have a color assigned to the voiceover, music, SFX. Here we are on a pretty simple project, but sometimes I also use different colors for different types of sounds.
Okay, music.
I like the intro of this one. It really feels like a build-up. Here too, but with a more sustained rhythm. The goal will be to identify the interesting parts, the ones we'll need, because clearly the music is 3 minutes long, and we are going to take, 30 seconds for the intro? So we're going to have to cut the fat, take small parts, then put them back together to try to have something coherent. I obviously took the intro for the beginning, then the part a bit deeper in the background. 1, 2, 3. Boom, that's enough. Let's cut and we'll conclude. I'm going to get the part where I have the cut. Why does it work? In this case, we don't need to mix the different parts. When it's very regular like this, you can just use the waveform to cut on the beat. The end is a little bit abrupt, but there's another part I want to use on this music, here.
I like it. You have a kind of a riser. It goes up like that. It fits the moment perfectly. I need to come back to the order of creation. It depends on the project, but most of the time this part about the music, I do it before the editing. The order is cut out the voiceover, then I do a first pre-editing as we talked about earlier, just to get a vision of the narration. Here I know I'm working on 3 parts. I edit the music, and when it's done, I have my time markers. I do the bulk of the editing with FX and everything, and then I come back to the sound, arranging the music if necessary, and I work on the sound design part at the end.
For the second part of the music, it's simpler. I just took the most dynamic part, the one that really puts you in it. And I shorten it to approach the end. Always try to use the beginning or the end of the song. If you try to fix it yourself with fades, you'll never get a really great result. Usually it's crap. Here I just shorten it so the outro is not too long. Here you go, 2 really great music that fits really well to the atmosphere that I want to get. By the way, I'm going to save this artist on Artlist. I like what he does. If I need aggressive hip-hop sound, yeah, it's cool.
A quick but very important disclaimer about the products or services I will be showing on the channel. My rule of thumb is to only talk about what I personally use and I find really good. I want my advice to be as sincere as possible, but keep one thing in mind. You have 2 types of influencer. What a disgusting word. You have those who are willing to sell you any shit, and you have those who really believe in the value of what they offer. But even they, and I include myself in this, we are the vision center on ourselves, on our needs, which are not necessarily yours. As I said, there are other online music or stock footage services that may be more for you.
Let's talk about Artgrid, for example. They have chosen a very high-end positioning for their footage. These are real directors who are behind them, usually with big cinema cameras. You can download log formats. You have other websites that offer video quality. I don't want to say lower end, but more adapted to small productions on YouTube, for example.
What I mean is that a service that I think is good, that is inherently good, doesn't mean a service that fits you. When I present things to you, when you listen to a YouTuber presenting things to you, it doesn't exonerate you from 1. Researching about the competition, 2. Listening to several opinions, if possible contradictory, to make your own thought, and buying only what you really need and that corresponds to you. Okay, the moral lesson is over, let's move on. Sound design. The goal here is not to go into the most complex technique. Tell yourself that it is a profession in its own right. What I want to do today is to show you the way out of the classic explosions and gunfires that are used everywhere when you start out. To focus instead on how to create the sound environment that allows your audience to immerse themselves in the story, that allow you to support the visual to make it more present. The sounds I used came from the live recording during the shoot, some from my own sound library that I have created over the years, but mostly I took advantage of Artlist's SFX part.
The first thing to do is to learn the different types of sound you can use in a montage like this. And their website, it's a great place to start. I really like the way it's organized. It helps you find the elements you really need. First of all on the home page, but also in the section. The first 2, it's really the sounds that will allow you to create an atmosphere, the place where you are, the environment, a forest or in the heart of the city, or the weather. Human, well, there are sounds of the human body, breathing, things like that. The last musical it's all that will be jingle, intro. We won't be interested in that. Let's look at the whooshes, typically the basic sounds for the transitions.
Short, long, nothing difficult to understand. Or then you have the risers, sounds that have a really slow attack to make the things go up, you know, that takes you with it. Downer is the opposite, reverse is stuff like that. It's good to express the feeling of time. You also have the impacts that will be really useful, the bass drop like.
We will first browse the website for a while to build up a good basic library before starting our project. Obviously a lot of transition and impact sounds, but we will also think about how to transcribe the sound atmosphere of the visuals in the montage. Outdoor sounds, sounds from the street and the city, room tones that correspond to large warehouses like the CrossFit box. I'm also going to need metallic sounds and weights that are manipulated for the barbell exercise, shoes on the floor when he's running, and more exotic sounds like liquid, underwater effects for the parts we saw about the bloodstream, glitches, etc. In the end, as I said, it's a pretty simple project, especially since the second part is quite light in terms of sound effects. I wanted it to be driven by the music. Believe me when I tell you that it can be much more complicated than that.
Okay, so we're already going to mutate the music tracks, but we're going to keep the voiceover so that we can position the sounds properly. As I was telling you, I have to avoid placing the peak of a sound effect on the voice. So first thing, we already have the ambient sound of the street before the image, even before the music starts. You're already transported somewhere before you even know where and what it's all about.
S'entraîner.
Can you hear there? The sounds will support the jump cuts. We don't have the same environmental sound all along, but several. They are just a few frames off, so your brain can anticipate before you even visualize what's going on. There we arrive in the main place. We have this ambient sound with very deep basses. Before we even have the visual, we hear the rope. Likewise, we hear a sound of fabric just before we get the visual on the flags. Did you see how the ambient sound is suddenly turned off? Same thing, we have the flash and just the sound of the bar, of the breathing due to the effort. This is a good illustration of how sound design works. There's not one sound that I could place here and that will do the job globally, no. It's a juxtaposition of several of them, different, but that will create a whole and stick to the visual patchwork. We have human voice sounds, metal, ambient sounds, scratch, a lot of things happening at the same time. I also took some old noises from transistors, cassette players, very mechanical stuff to manage my visual transitions here. Not everything can be solved with swooshes. Beam, here the underwater sounds we were talking about. It's crazy how it helps to sell the thing. Otherwise you are but with it, yeah, totally. They are breathing, the noise that accompanies the barbell. Fun fact, there's a million timer sounds on Artgrid, but I asked JP to send me the real sound of our box timer. When you hear these beeps, the world is about to start. You know it will hurt very soon. Here, of course, we have our first real big swoosh to mark the cut. A timer to mark time, and a riser, you get sucked into the thing and it starts, the rhythm changes. The next part is much simpler. As I said, we are mostly driven by the music. Very quickly we're going to have glitches. Hear the sound of the wall ball to mark the impact. The step on the gravel. Some ambient sounds. Okay. In short, the same thing but lighter. The goal, and this is especially true for the first part, is to be able to listen to your video without the music, just the sound design. If despite that you got carried away with it, if it works, that means you've done your job pretty well.
Finally, for the outro, always spend a little more time refining the beginning and the end. First of all, we have this clothing sound on which I increase the echo. And last sound, a mic drop. Nothing crazy taken separately, but when you combine the whole,
Be resilient.
You've seen it, or rather you've heard it. There is no need to put big heavy sound everywhere, a lot of swooshes. The goal is to create a sound universe, something that captures the attention and makes the visual more real, more live.
don't hesitate also to modify the duration of the sound. Just be careful to modify their pitch accordingly. And you also have plenty of IQ effects that you can apply to enhance or at least transform the sounds to something more like the effect you want to achieve. Just have fun and don't be afraid to play a little bit.
Last point, don't forget the order of the sound's presence. Voiceover, music, and finally sound design. You also need to spend some time on the mixing so that your songs don't take over the music. There's nothing worse than cacophony. Some sounds can sometimes peak and take over to mark a particular event, but this should be the exception. Likewise, the music should not prevent the voiceover for being intelligible. Okay, we've finished this series of 3 videos on the Be Resilient project. I hope it made you want to 1. Make videos, 2. Do CrossFit, I'm sure I sold it to you, and 3. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. So if you have a generous heart and you want the world to be a better place, well yeah, drop a like, activate notifications if you only had subscribed. I post once every 2 weeks, I'm not going to harass you with notifications, no worries. And most of all, sharing this video everywhere is really what helps me the most. Okay, see you mate, keep on creating. I don't need Artlist, I can actually make my own sounds.